One of the features I'm most grateful for in Word is the ability to check spelling and grammar, so that if I make a mistake, there's a good chance that Word will catch it, point it out to me, and offer suggestions to correct it. Let's take a look at some examples. I'll go ahead and type a title for this document, but along the way I'll make a mistake, and as soon as I move on, if I were to press the spacebar key, or in this case press enter on the keyboard to move to the next line, you'll notice that the word patience, or what was supposed to be the word patience, has a squiggly red underline underneath it. So I get an immediate indication that this word is possibly spelled wrong, and I could go back and change the word. I could go back and correct my mistake, but even better, I can let Word help me out with that task. So I'll go ahead and right-click on the word, and you'll notice that I have a few options here. First off, I'll have one or more suggestions, if applicable, for words that I might have intended to type. So in this case, I just reversed the E and the I in patience, and so you see that I have the corrected form here. But let's assume that the word I typed here is actually a real word. Perhaps it's a proper noun, a location name, for example, that Word simply doesn't recognize. I could choose to ignore the error or to ignore all errors for this specific word. In other words, every time that this misspelled patience appears in the document, it will be ignored by Word. But if this is a real word, then I may very well want to add that word to the dictionary, which I can do by choosing Add to Dictionary from that pop-up menu. And that will ensure that in the future, if I type this variation on the spelling for patience, then Word will not alert me that it is wrong because it assumes it's correct since it's in the dictionary. Of course, in this case, the word is indeed spelled wrong, so I'll go ahead and just choose the correction from the top of that pop-up menu, and you'll notice that the text gets updated automatically. In this document, you'll also find some text that has a green underline, and that indicates a grammatical error or a suspected grammatical error in any event. For example, the word but here has a green squiggly underline. And if I right-click on the word but, you'll see that I get an indication of the problem. In this case, the first word in a sentence is not capitalized, and so I can simply click in order to replace that. And I can scroll through my document looking for other changes like this. So for example, you'll see the word told here has a green squiggly underline, and the suggestion here is that the comma should be removed, and I can choose whether or not I want to accept that change. In this case, I did want to emphasize with a bit of a pause there, so I'll leave that comma in place. In addition to reviewing the actual document itself, looking for those red or green squiggly lines, we can also perform a grammar and spelling check. I'll go ahead and place the insertion point at the top of the document so that the entire document will be reviewed from the very beginning. And then on the ribbon, I'll choose the Review tab, and then I'll click the Spelling and Grammar button at the far left under Proofing. And that will bring up a dialog that will take me step by step through the suggested corrections for both spelling and grammar. So you see, for example, the word group. Word suggests that it should be plural, as in groups, but in this case it actually is a singular group, and so I can ignore that specific error. Now, if I never want Word to correct me about subject and verb agreement, then I can choose to ignore this rule for the current spell check. But I just want to skip this one instance, so I'll click the Ignore Once button, and then we move on to a suspected spelling error, and sure enough, I did neglect to include the letter E in forecast. You can see that there are several suggestions. The first one happens to be the correct one, so I'll make sure that the desired correction is selected, and then I'll click the Change button. I could also choose Change All, so that if the word forecast appears without an E numerous times throughout the document, all of those instances can be corrected with one click. Generally speaking, I prefer to apply the corrections on a case-by-case basis, unless, for example, I simply typed a proper name incorrectly and that proper name appears throughout the document, so there's really no ambiguity. But in this case, for example, in some cases, the misspelling might be forecast with the E in the middle, and in other cases, it might be forecast with a space in between. So since there is the possibility of some ambiguity, I'll just click the Change button rather than Change All. And then Word will continue taking me through my document, offering suggestions for corrections of spelling and grammar. I can ignore as needed, and in this case, a couple of those errors are actually not errors at all. And here's the recommendation to remove the comma. I can ignore that, but note, by the way, we also have an explain button. So if you're not clear on why Word is suggesting a particular correction, you can click explain, and that will bring up the help dialog, and it will explain exactly what rule it's referring to. So in this case, comma use. I'll go ahead and close that help dialog though. And at this point, I'm finished with the spelling and grammar check, so I'll go ahead and click the close button. So whether you want to review individual changes as you're working on a document, or to perform an overall spelling and grammar check perhaps when you're finished creating the document, Word provides some great help in terms of making sure your document is as accurate as possible.